Hello and welcome into Froggy Talking Sports with Ryan and Joe. My name is Ryan Peters, and it's good to be back. Glad to be with you guys. Joining in, Joe, it's good to see you again and be back with you. I hope everything went well out with the show. Obviously, in our sports world, everything got turned upside down, but outside of that, how did everything go last week here on Froggy Talking Sports?
Well, Ryan, I think it went pretty well, but when you were doing your opening there, did I hear a little Spanish accent? Did you go to Florida for a week and you come back and now you have a Spanish accent?
I have no comment.
Oh man. No, everything went well, Ryan. We got through it without you. It was a labor of love last week, carrying on the show without you. It just wasn't the same, but we did get through it.
Well, I appreciate that. I know that is a complete lie, and that would be the easiest thing to do is actually begin this show and go through this without me. And this sarcasm and very lack of knowledge on the sporting side. But I do appreciate it. I'm glad to be back with you guys talking sports. And before we get started, I just want to go ahead and reach out to the community and tell everybody, what's happened over the last weekend. It's obviously something we could not foresee. It kind of took us all, no pun intended, by storm. But, it's amazing to see what this community is able to do when it really needs people to stand up. And it's not the land that makes this a community, it's the people within it. And, the sports teams, the local sports teams helping out, the local officials, everybody come together to really help lend a hand. And I hope, Joe, for the next 45 to 60 minutes, we can take your mind off of, some of the things going on, and, you're able to be enjoyed listening to two guys sit here in a booth talk sports. But I know obviously you've been out there and doing your part and seeing what's going on in the community. But, I hope we can do our part, take your mind off it for a little bit, because we got some topics here. But at the end of the day, we're definitely right there with you in Switzerland County, and, our thoughts and prayers are definitely going out to everyone that's been affected here over the weekend.
Yeah, for sure. And really, and we'll get to the sports here in just a second, Ryan. But what I've seen over the last couple of days really hits home and shows you why we live in a community like we live in. Everybody always has their differences, but it seems when this community runs into a hard time, everybody becomes a giant family here, and that's why I live here, that's why I stay here, and that's why I raise my kids here. So, to everybody that is helping, everybody does appreciate that, and everybody does appreciate living in this community.
Right, and it's easy to go out there and say what Switzerland County doesn't have, but what it does have is a truly awesome group of people, and obviously coaches going out there and using the young men to help rebuild their community, because at the end of the day, we're all in this as one here in Switzerland County. But let's go ahead, Joe, and dive right into topic number one, where things aren't as rosy, at least on my side of things. This came out of nowhere. I don't know where you were, but I was sitting there, and I got an alert, which has been talked about a little bit, but not a lot, about expanding the college football playoffs. And I've kind of been on an island to where I enjoy the 14 playoff. I've always thought that it should be an elitist club. I think that college football, compared to other sports, and we've talked about this, there's usually only 4 teams, maybe not even that truly deserve to play for a championship in college football compared to other sports. But money talks, and the College Football Committee playoff committee has decided that they want to move to 12 teams. So first, I would like you to explain that, how exactly that's going to work starting in 2026, Joe. And then I want you to give your opinion if you like that, or if you're somewhere indifferent, or if you think it's just a horrible idea.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. It's not that hard to explain, but I think it would be easier, Ryan, if I read exactly what the College Football Playoffs Committee has put out.
That sounds ideal.
Yeah, so there won't be any mixing of words here. It says the College Football Playoff Committee says that the 12-team field will consist of the 6th highest-ranked conference championships and 6 teams at large. The playoff committee will continue to select and rank these teams as they do currently. The first games will take place on either the second or third weekend of December, with at least 12 days separating the playoffs and the conference championship games. The top 4 seeds will receive first-round byes. Those are reserved for the highest-ranked conference champions in this model. Notre Dame or any other independent team will never have a chance for a first-round bye because they will never play in a conference championship game.
That makes sense.
Yeah. This gets more ridiculous as I read this, Ryan.
Yeah.
Seeds 1 through 4 will begin their playoffs in a quarterfinals. They will be given the choice of where they want to play their New Year's Day 6 bowl game. The New Year's Day's 6 bowl games. The number 1 seed will pick first, followed by the number 2, and so on. Bowl games for the quarterfinals and semifinals will be rotated on an annual basis. The current New Year's Day 6 bowl games on New Year's Day are the Rose Bowl, Sugar Bowl, Orange Bowl, Fiesta Bowl, Peach Bowl, Cotton Bowl. The College Football Playoff Committee championship game will continue to be played at a neutral site. So what that tells me, Ryan, is basically if you win a conference championship in Division I, major conference championship, or minor conference championship, and you're ranked, you are going to get a first-round bye. So looking at this, essentially what that means is if you were going to take the 2021 championship, the playoffs, 2021, the number 1 seed would have been Alabama, the number 2 seed would have been Michigan, the number 3 seed would have been Cincinnati, and the number 4 seed would have been Baylor. Georgia would not have got a first-round bye, and we all know how that turned out last year. They ended up being national champions. Now, a couple things that really strike me with this new system is we sat here a couple weeks ago right on this show and talked about how great it was that, like, the University of Cincinnati was moving to the Big 12 because they are going to start playing in 2 years opponents that are worthy opponents that give them quality wins that heighten their ability to get in the college football playoffs.
Right.
Well, now that this has been put out, I'd say there's no reason for the University of Cincinnati to leave the AAC. Because that is a conference that they can win on an annual basis, or at least competing for the conference championship on an annual basis.
Yep.
And if they can get ranked in the top 15 or top 10, they're making the college football playoffs.
Yeah, and it's not just like, and to give people perspective, it's the Big 10, the Pac-12, the Big 12, the SEC, the ACC, and now the AAC. So those are your top 6 that automatically get people into the playoffs if you win that conference championship. So you're right. I mean, you're talking Houston, Memphis, and UC right now in the AAC. And it used to be UCF, but they've kind of changed things since Scott Frost left.
Right.
Which he's doing great in Nebraska, let me tell you. But I just think that, the first thing that, okay, let me put it this way. What was great about Week 1, besides the fact that all of our teams lost, is the teams that we played. UC went on the road to Arkansas. Notre Dame went on the road to play Ohio State. Why would Ohio State play Notre Dame?
They wouldn't.
They wouldn't.
They won't.
Why would why would Arkansas play UC?
They won't. Why would UC play Arkansas at that point?
Right. It makes zero sense in the non-conference. And to be fair, and I don't like this feeling, for Ohio State or for Notre Dame in that game, now moving forward, it means nothing to lose that game. I'm sick to my stomach that Notre Dame lost that game. You're sick to your stomach the way UC lost to Arkansas because you're like, this is a devastating blow to our end-of-year possibility if we want to play for a national championship.
Right, it ends it, essentially.
It's very close. Now, maybe not so much for Notre Dame, but for UC.
UC's done.
Right, you really needed to win that game.
Right.
Now, okay.
Right.
Who cares? What you should not, as a UC fan, be more upset if you lost to Tulsa than you should feel if you lost to Arkansas. These games in the offseason or in the non-conference schedule should matter, and there will be Cupcake City. It'll look like Alabama if you think it's laughable when Alabama pays a team to come in
Right.
in the non-conference and beat them by 75, guess what? That's what they all do. The only people that should be excited for the non-conference schedule moving forward are the FCS schools, that have this playoff format instead, because now they're like, heck yeah, we're all about to get paid. Ain't nobody going to be playing anybody in the non-conference now.
Well, and why would a team like Alabama, they play their 8 SEC games, and then you're going to see them playing teams like Appalachian State and Kennesaw State and teams that you don't even know where they're at on the map, because why would they play anybody?
They won't play Appalachian State because they just put up 61 points against North Carolina, so it'll be Furman. It'll be the Furman. and that being said, I mentioned I was a proponent for 4 teams, and I fully believe, based on what we've already seen in the playoffs, because normally the playoff games are pretty close to blowouts on all of them until you get to the championship. I don't want to see a 3-loss team in the playoffs. I just don't.
Right.
And it's almost impossible for that not to happen now. You're talking about teams. The playoff committee was, we've never seen a 2-loss team make it to the playoffs. Well, guess what? Now you're never not going to see a 2-loss team in the playoffs. Now it's going to be, we're going to sit here on this show one day, Joe, if we're still on the air and they haven't kicked us off yet, going, man, do you think that 4-loss Utah really is much worse than that 3-loss Oregon State? And that's awful. And you know why that's awful? Because Alabama will beat them both by 75.
Right, and you're right, Ryan, and that's why, I was a proponent, kind of on the other end of you, and saying that I thought that the college football playoffs needed expanded. But my idea of expanding the college football playoffs was to 6 teams, where you give the top 2 seeds a bye, and then the 4 teams play into playing the top 2 seeds in week 2. And I think that what we have done now is we went to the other end of the spectrum and really gone extreme with this, that you're absolutely right, because at the end of the day, if there's a 12-team playoff and a University of Cincinnati can get in, which take nothing away from UC, they were really good last year, but we saw what happened when they played Alabama. The same thing would have happened if they would have played Georgia. Look at what happened to Michigan when they played Georgia.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you have. I think teams deserve, especially if you can get in the top 5. And my idea of 6 teams was basically to say, okay, when you look at the 3, 4, and 5th team in the nation, they're all really close. So to make it an easy format, say, okay, the top 6 teams, we're going to have a college football playoff with top 6 teams, and the 1 and 2 seed get a bye. I thought that would have been a perfect setup. It would have kept I don't want to call it riffraff, because if you're a top 25 team in the nation, I don't want to call you a riffraff team, but normally the top 20 or the 25th ranked team in the nation is not going to play the 1 or 2 team in the nation and be able to compete against them on a normal basis. So, I don't know that I am a fan of the 12-team college football playoffs. I know that I'm not. I'm just trying to be nice about it. I think this is a horrible idea. I think it's way too many teams. I think the idea that, you could take a Notre Dame in 2026 when this college football playoff system starts, and Notre Dame plays the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th ranked team in the nation, which is kind of a stretch, but let's say they do, and they beat all of them, and they're the number 1 ranked team in the nation going into the college football playoffs, which is a possibility that they could be. And you're telling me that they don't deserve a first-round bye because they're an independent school and they don't play in a conference? That's a bunch of I can't say what that's a bunch of, Ryan. We're on the radio, but I'm just not happy with it.
I think that even more, and my first initial reaction to this was, okay, well, Notre Dame should get in every year. But I think about the backlash for Notre Dame. Obviously, every time we talk about Notre Dame, we put it online. A hater's got something to say, and that's fine. But from my standpoint, I was like, this past weekend, I want to see Notre Dame beat Ohio State. Why? Because I don't want to hear the noise anymore. I think that Notre Dame's a top program, and now if you're just going to usher them in almost every single year because there's 12-team playoff, it doesn't change the fact until they win against a top 3 team that now you can put that to bed. now I don't know how we get there. How does Notre Dame, an independent, find a school that's willing to play them? I don't know. It has to be. The only way I can think of is if Notre Dame says you get a share of the NBC money, because there's no reason anymore. You took the greatest part of college football, which essentially was the regular season was a playoff every single week.
Right.
And it's gone. And now a team like Notre Dame, it'll be harder than ever to find. And if there's anything that's going to usher them into a conference, it'll have to be this. Because if they end up, and it may not be on season one, because granted, these contracts are years in advance.
Right.
Notre Dame scheduled Ohio State 4 or 5 years ago. It's not like they did this last week. So those things in the beginning, Notre Dame's like, well, we still got a good schedule because of what we scheduled years upon years ago. But moving forward, I just don't see why a team would why would you play Notre Dame? Why would you even risk it? And then on top of that, when you have 12 teams in it and you're playing these games, and I know the top teams get a bye, but if you have to play the number 6 team or the number 8 team or whatever it may be, now you're just risking injury when you shouldn't have to, because you're already that much better, and it has a chance to change the playoffs because you now have to play a game against a team that you're not even in the same league as. And I think that has an opportunity to change the way that, the champion's crown, in my opinion, by playing these games that, you mentioned that there's a 13-day layoff from the conference championship game to the first playoff game, and that's not if you have a bye.
Right.
Joe, you coach football. If you're on a roll, do you want to sit out for 20 days?
No, that's a long time to wait. But Ryan, I will say this, and there is a tail side to the coin that you're flipping, though, as far as being able to schedule games for independent schools like Notre Dame. And what I want you to think about is basically you're not going to play Notre Dame because if you're in Alabama, if you're at Georgia, you're banking on that SEC championship every year. You're automatically going to get in because you're going to be a top 5 ranked school and you're going to win the SEC. So if you're Georgia, Alabama, why would you play them? But what you're not looking at is teams like Arkansas, the Big 12 teams, the Pac-12 teams that can't necessarily that will probably be in the top 10, top 15, and more than likely make the playoffs based on where they're ranked. But they can't bank that they're going to win the conference championship, so they're going to have to keep playing quality games. And I think moving forward, that's probably where Notre Dame's going to have to make their money.
Well, I agree with half of that. I agree that it will be Big 12, AAC, Pac-12 if it's still around. SEC, I don't think a single team in the SEC goes, no, we got our own gauntlet. We're just trying. If we're the second best team in the ACC and with what we have to go through on a conference-wise, I think we have a better chance than to lose to you in the non-conference.
Well, I think you have a chance of playing schools like Arkansas every year.
Possibly, but as a Notre Dame person, I don't want to play Arkansas. I want to play other teams. So, it's a great discussion. We'll get more into it. I'm sure there's going to be more details, but that's going to go ahead and wrap it up. When we come back, we're going to talk about the NFL Week 1, and we're going to go against the spread, and we can really show you how stupid we are trying to pick against the spread and pick against Las Vegas. This is Froggy Talking Sports with Ryan and Joe. We'll be right back.
What's up, guys? I'm Mike Goodpasser from the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I want to thank you guys for listening in to Ryan and Joe on the Sports Hour. And I want to remind you, the Grueling Truth Sports Network is powered and brought to you by Betting.net. Betting.net is the best bet for betting the online casino or sports book that's right for you. Make sure you check them out now, guys, at Betting.net. This is a great service. If you live in Indiana or you live in Kentucky or you live in Ohio, if you go on Betting.net, it will actually take you to the best sites to legally bet in the state you live in. Make sure you check them out at Betting.net. And right now, we're going to go back to Ryan and Joe at the Sports Hour.
Welcome back to Froggy Talking Sports with Ryan and Joe. Also want to let you know that this will be on Facebook, on our Facebook page, and also on the Grueling Truth. So if you missed segment 1, 2, or want to hear all 3, you can tune into our social media pages and find that at any time. Again, those are on Froggy Talking Sports on Facebook or also on the grueling truth. Well, Joe, it's that time of the year, NFL season week 1. Are you ready?
It's my favorite time of year. A lot of people love Christmas, Ryan. Some people like Thanksgiving, which I love Thanksgiving too. But week 1, NFL football, this is what I live for.
Everybody has the same record and the same opportunity to win a Super Bowl right now.
Except the Dallas Cowboys, who have already been eliminated from the playoffs.
And that's tough for you Cowboy fans. I know. You're a little bit everywhere. You're transplanted. This is not 1990, and you've been suffering. I get it. We've been there. But we're going to do something here on the show where we go against Vegas, and we try to make picks based upon the spread. Now, we're not throwing any money down because it is a recession, but we are going to hypothetically go through each single game and let everybody know that how we feel based upon these matchups and see how ridiculously hard it is to go against the spread based upon what Vegas has put out there so far for week 1.
Right. There's a reason why Vegas is as nice as – well, I don't want to call Vegas nice. There's a reason why there's so much stuff out there, right?
Yes. There's a reason why they have a lot of money. We'll just put it that way. So let's go ahead and kick it off with the Thursday night game. That is the Buffalo Bills visiting the Super Bowl champions, L.A. Rams. And the L.A. Rams are actually 2.5-point underdogs. Now, Joe, I will let you begin on who you think will win this game against the spread. Do you have Buffalo covering the 2.5, or do you think the Rams are going to be spotted enough to win that game and cover the spread?
Well, I think that a 2.5-point underdog in an NFL game is essentially saying that they're even. So I would not bet the spread in this game. I think that the Bills probably are going to win that, and I don't think that the Rams are going to cover this year.
Okay, so you wouldn't bet the spread, but the whole point of this,
the money line.
That's not what I'm asking. We're doing the 2.5. Do you want the 2.5 for the Bills, or would you rather pick the Rams to cover?
Well, I think the Bills are going to win the game, and I don't know. I don't know the last time a team. There'd have to be a safety thrown in there and a half point somewhere else. I'm going to say that they're going to lose by more than 2.5 points, so they're not going to cover.
And see, that's where I am. I think the Bills win this game, and I believe that they will cover the 2.5. Because to me, like you, it's pretty much a pick 'em. Unless usually the only way that doesn't work is if you're talking a 20-17 game where the kickers get involved. But
they still don't cover the spread with that.
Right. Well, I'm just saying like a 1-point game
right.
in that nature. But I believe that the Buffalo Bills come out because what usually happens in these opening games is the previous year Super Bowl champion, they get told how great they are and how they're Super Bowl champs, and the players get their rings. And then when it comes down to it, the other team's on the sideline like, God, we want to kill these guys. This is taking forever. And typically that team comes in and ends up winning the game. So I'm going to go ahead and give Buffalo, I say they cover the 2.5. Now moving on to a game that's actually gives me a little bit of anxiety thinking about it, picking it. And it's the Philadelphia Eagles on the road against the Lions, with the spread being Philadelphia Eagles being favorites by 3.5, which is a very odd number and one that could definitely hurt you if you ended up trying to bet on this game. Joe, you made the decision to go first last time. I will go first this time. My heart says that the Lions will cover at home. I have such a hard time picking road favorites, and I think maybe it's the Hard Knocks in me that says Dan Campbell and his 16 gallons of coffee is not going to have Detroit ready to play football. And the other part of me that says I've heard how great the Eagles are supposed to be for the last 25 years. Mm-hmm. And it says, I think Detroit will cover. But it's so hard to say that Detroit's going to cover a game. But I'm going to say Detroit's going to cover the game. Give me the 3.5 and the Lions cover.
No, I'm going to give you that. I'm going to go right there with you. Not only do I think that they cover, I think they win the game.
Oh, okay.
So
nice.
I mean, this is the battle of two bad teams right now, and I'm sorry, I don't care if you're a Philadelphia Eagle fan. If you heard that they were going to be good this year, again, they are not.
So the NFC East, you can go at Joe Spilman. So now a game that's a little closer to home, at least when it comes to one of these teams. The Indianapolis Colts will go on the road to take on the Houston Texans. The Colts are favored in this game, Joe. You have not looked at the spreads. I have. Do you want to guess the line on this one?
I'd say Colts by 7.5.
No, it's 8.5.
Oh, I was close.
You were close, and that would make more sense, and that's where I would lean if it was closer to that. But 8.5.
Basically says you're winning by a touchdown and a field goal.
Yes,
to cover.
And in the NFL on the road, with what the last time we saw the Colts, so much changing on the offensive side there, the Colts haven't won an opener, I believe, in over 5 years.
And it's week 1.
Give me the Texans plus 8.5.
I'm gonna take the same. I think the Colts win the game, but I don't think they cover.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. At plus minus 390 odds. You know, you're telling me that the Colts are obviously heavily favored. The Texans showed a lot of heart last year. I mean, they were predicted by far to be the worst team in football, and somebody said, "Where do you come up with a win?" They actually got 4, and they played much harder than that. So I am with you. I think this one's a lot closer than what people expect. I think Colts fans actually will be sweating it out for 4 quarters.
Me too.
So now we're moving down south. Where
was it? Are you channeling your inner Brian Kelly?
That is exactly who I'm channeling, sir. So we're going down to Atlanta in the Bayou, where a guy that cannot have a fake accent lost on a field goal. So New Orleans, the Saints, will be on the road to take on the Falcons, which a lot of people believe the Falcons are the worst or one of the worst teams in the NFL, trying to go with Marcus Mariota, the former top 2 NFL pick, now resurrecting his career with the Falcons. The Saints are favored in this game. They get their quarterback back with Jameis Winston coming off the torn ACL, but what they don't have is their former head coach. He's decided to retire. Dennis Allen now steps in for Sean Payton. The Saints are 5.5-point favorites. Again, another road favorite. Joe, where do you lean on this one?
I think New Orleans wins the game by more than 7, so they're going to cover. You know, and I don't know that Marcus Mariota even remains the full-time starter in Atlanta. I think that there's some quarterback controversy going on down there. Desmond Ridder, the day he was drafted, promised Atlanta a Super Bowl, so I think he's starting by the end of the season.
And if you're curious, that game kicks off at 1:01.
Seriously?
That's what it says right here, 1:01. So if you show up at 1 o'clock, and you will be very angry that the football has not met toe. But, no, I agree. I think that the Atlanta Falcons, I think their offense will be able to do some things. They have nobody on defense outside of A.J. Terrell. I think that the Falcons' defense is rough. So now moving on, to me, possibly the biggest blowout, and I'm surprised this line's not bigger. If you're going to pick a road favorite, the Ravens are playing the Jets. And it looks like Joe Flacco will try to do a revenge game against his former team. Now, what do you think the line in this one would be, Joe?
10.
Minus 6.5.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, man.
And I smashed that with a hammer.
Minus 10. Well, yeah, minus 10. But really, I'd almost think that I'd almost be okay with 14.5 there. I think
I'm telling you,
the Jets are bad.
I don't know how the Jets stay within a touchdown. And I know it's the NFL, and this will probably be the one where we look back at it and like, God, we're idiots. But I just don't see how you put the Colts at 8.5 against the Texans, and then with a backup quarterback, the Ravens getting healthy again, and say, we don't think you're good enough to cover a touchdown.
Well, let's see what that line is on Sunday.
You think the money flowing will change that?
Yeah, I think people are all over that right now.
But you're going Ravens.
Yeah.
To cover. Yeah. Okay.
I'd go with Ravens to cover if it was minus 14.
Now that's one, and we're not going to give betting advice because that's not what you do on this channel. But that's one that you could do an alternate spread and maybe make a little bit more.
But we don't know anything about that because we are not betting men.
Nope, I saw that on YouTube once. So moving to an AFC East matchup, the Patriots are on the road to take on the Dolphins. The Patriots come in as 2.5-point underdogs. The Dolphins and their new offense, and Tyreek Hill talking about how Tua Tagovailoa is the greatest quarterback that's ever walked the earth, are the favorites. Joe, I lean Patriots to win the game, let alone the 2.5 points. So I'm going to pick the Patriots not only to cover, but I think that they will win the game.
I'm going to pick that as well, and I would never give credit to a quarterback that I can't even pronounce his name of being the greatest ever. I don't care what Tyreek Hill says. I think the Patriots win this game by more than 3, so they're obviously going to cover the spread.
Yeah, and also
in my opinion,
Bill Belichick has one thing that he's mastered defensively, and that is taking away your best weapon. And if they're not able to throw the ball to Tyreek Hill, I just don't think there's enough firepower for the Dolphins to keep up in this game, so that's why I go Patriots as well. Speaking of revenge games, the Cleveland Browns will be on the road to take on the Carolina Panthers, and if you were hiding under a rock, Baker Mayfield now plays for the Carolina Panthers and gets to play against his former team at home. The Cleveland Browns, which this line is a little bit closer than I thought as well, is 2.5. If Jacoby Beef Brissett will be the starter in that game for the Cleveland Browns. So the Panthers at 2.5-point favorites. Joe, that's where I lean because I've seen Baker Mayfield when he's mad. And you won't like him when he's angry.
Well, I think the Carolina Panthers with Baker Mayfield are a much better team than the Cleveland Browns with Jacoby Brissett. And I think that they win the game by more than 3. I think they win by more than a field goal. I think we're not going to get into Baker Mayfield too much, but Baker Mayfield is not a bad quarterback. He wasn't a bad quarterback in Cleveland. He had a bad year last year because he got hurt, and he played when he was hurt. He is an adequate NFL quarterback, and I think he runs away with this game on Sunday.
Yeah, you're right. That's what happens when you play hurt, folks.
Right.
People think that you're terrible, even though it's clearly hurt. But one thing that's for sure is when you doubt Baker Mayfield, he normally beats you by 3 touchdowns.
Right. And he will.
A road game for the 49ers as they head out to the Midwest. They take on the Chicago Bears. The 49ers are spotted 6.5. This is where the 2 young quarterbacks coming out of the same class, Trey Lance and Justin Fields, will take square. But outside of that, that's about where the only similarities lie, as it looks like the 49ers are clearly a much better team than the Chicago Bears right now. Give me the 6.5 points for the San Francisco 49ers. Joe, how do you feel?
I think the San Francisco 49ers win this game with Jimmy G playing quarterback by more than 6.5, so I'm going to take that as well. Is that
really going out on a limb? Because I feel like they for sure win by 6.5 if Jimmy Garoppolo is playing. But with Trey Lance, that's the only thing that goes, well, maybe he just throws it to the other team.
No, I think they'll be fine. I think they win by more than 6.5. I'd be surprised if the Bears are able to put up much on San Francisco's defense at all.
Another game, which possibly could be the worst matchup of Week 1, the Jacksonville Jaguars take on the Washington Potatoes, now called the Commies, now called the Commanders. So the Jacksonville Jaguars are plus 3.5 on the road. And, Joe, this is the one game I have no idea. And the only reason I look at this, they both made a lot of changes. I don't know who wins the game outright, so give me the points. I'll take the Jaguars to cover.
Well, I think the Jaguars will win, and I think did you say it was 3.5 or 3?
It's 3.5.
Okay. I mean, when you're talking about winning a game, if you're going to go with your gut, if you're that type of person, I think that you take the outright win there by more than 3.5. So yeah, I'll go with Jaguars there. But I'm up in
the Jaguars being spotted 3.5. They're not favored 3.5.
Oh.
Yeah, they're being spotted.
Well, I think the Jaguars win the game.
Yeah.
So for sure they'll cover then.
Now a battle in the AFC West where this might be the best conference, probably is the best conference in football. The Las Vegas Raiders take on the LA Chargers in LA in front of about 20,000 people if they decide to show up. The Raiders are plus 3.5 to the Chargers. I think the Raiders surprised a lot of people this year. I thought they were disrespected going into this year. I'm going to go ahead and say the Raiders plus 3.5 to cover, and I wouldn't be surprised if they win against the Chargers.
So Justin Herbert plays for the Chargers, right?
I do. And I also saw how they blew the game on their own field to not even get into the playoffs.
Yeah, that was last year, though. I'm going to disagree.
You mean this team that added Devontae Adams, same Raiders?
And I'm thinking about the game and the matchups here. Tell me the spread again, 3.5?
3.5 to the Chargers.
3.5 to the Chargers.
They are favorites.
I think the Chargers win the game, and I think they probably win by more than a field goal, so I'm going to go with the Chargers.
All right. Moving on to Daniel Jones's Giants for how long? He is on the road at Tennessee. The Titans are 5.5-point favorites. A lot of things changed in Tennessee. We have no idea who they're going to throw to besides Robert Woods coming off a torn ACL, as the wide receiver room has been gutted, but coming back is the behemoth, and hopefully healthy if you're a Titans fan, Derrick Henry. Do you think he has enough to carry this team on his back and beat the New York Giants by more than 5.5 points?
Derrick Henry looks like a man amongst boys when he runs the football in the NFL.
Yeah, I was going to say, against other men.
Against other men. You know, and I saw him probably last year, second round of the playoffs, and he may have been at 50-60%. I know he really pushed, and he was incredible then. I'm gonna say Titans have Derrick Henry on their side. Titans are probably looking okay this weekend.
I am with you. I'm going with King Henry. I say the Titans cover 5.5. Now going out west, it's the 4 o'clock games starting. This one starts at 4:26 according to FanDuel. Kansas City Chiefs are on the road at Arizona, where the Chiefs are 3.5-point favorites. Joe, how do you feel about that one?
Well, I'm gonna go with the Chiefs, and they're gonna beat Mr. Murray by more than 3.5.
I'm actually going to go the opposite. I think the Cardinals cover. It seems like the Cardinals are one of the hottest first-half football teams in football, and then once they get figured out, the second half is completely terrible, and also their quarterback typically gets hurt because he's 4'3". So I'm going to say the 4'3" Kyler Murray is able to take his team and cover at least 3.5, and I wouldn't be surprised if they win that one at home.
I'm going to tell you Kyler Murray's going to throw 1 touchdown and 3 interceptions.
And my fantasy team will suffer.
Pure guess, but if I'm right on that, I'm going to be really happy.
And I won't. NFC matchup up north. It's the Packers taking on. That's pretty good. Yeah. Don't laugh. That was good.
Leave him alone. He's just having a heart attack.
Yeah, I've been working on that all week. And taking on Minnesota Vikings, where the Packers are 1.5-point favorites. So essentially a pick 'em at 1.5. Joe, where do you go on this one?
I don't know. Tell me what you're thinking.
What I'm thinking is I don't see Aaron Rodgers not winning an NFC North game. Even though I have no idea who he's going to throw to, I just look at it as somehow, some way, the back-to-back NFL MVP against an AFC or an NFC North team will find a way to win. If it was against a different team, not the NFC North, a team that, you know, he's maybe doesn't see as much, it just seems like he owns the NFC North. So I'm going to go against the Packers, or I'm going to go with the Packers. You know, it's a pick 'em, 1.5. I'll say they cover.
I can agree with that. I don't have anything to dispute or any opposition to that.
The skill players say that the Minnesota Vikings should win. But at the end of the day, it's all about the dude behind center, and I trust Aaron Rodgers more than I trust Kirk Cousins. So if you don't like that, sorry. Well, we crapped on them earlier. Sunday Night Football, it's the Buccaneers taking on them Cowboys, where the Buccaneers are a 1.5 favorite against them boys. Joe, how do you lean on this one?
I think Buccaneers win by at least 7, so they're going to win and cover.
I am surprised by this line. I don't know why the Buccaneers would only be 1.5 favorites. I don't know if they think Tom Brady's still retired.
Well, I think that there is some, which I don't know if you saw Tom Brady's press conference after the last preseason game, but
yeah.
I don't know what was going on with him.
He's been dealing with some malarkey.
But I think maybe there's a lot of thought, a little bit too much thought when you talk about the spread in Vegas that goes into making these money lines, and I think that they're putting some, their algorithm is adding some extras in there that don't need to be there. At the end of the day, Tom Brady is playing the Dallas Cowboys, and Tom Brady wins by more than 7.
Do you think that if they raised it too high, the Cowboys wouldn't bet against their team, and now they're like, well, surely we think we're going to win. So, like, plus 1.5, heck yeah.
Well, knowing the Dallas Cowboys and their fans, I think if they raise it too high, they probably just think that they already lost the game. They don't even show up to play.
That's tough. That's tough. Moving on to the last game, and that is another revenge game as the Denver Broncos go on the road out the West Coast to take on the Seattle Sea Chickens. It is a 6.5-point favorite for Russell Wilson to take on his former team. Joe, I'm all over Denver on this one. I think they win by over 10 points, maybe even 2 touchdowns against the Seahawks.
I think they win by more than that. I don't be surprised if Denver wins by more than 30. So
I just don't see how the Seahawks score.
I'm taking Denver in any reasonable spread up to minus 30.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for week 1. We have forgot a game. No, just kidding. We're actually going to talk about it next. It's your Cincinnati Bengals taking on the terrible Pittsburgh Steelers. That's going to be next here on Ryan and Joe talking sports here on Froggy 95.9.
What's up, guys? I'm Mike Goodpasser from the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I want to thank you guys for listening in to Ryan and Joe on the Sports Hour. And I want to remind you, the Grueling Truth Sports Network is powered and brought to you by Betting.net. Betting.net is the best bet for betting the online casino or sports book that's right for you. Make sure you check them out now, guys, at Betting.net. This is a great service. If you live in Indiana or you live in Kentucky or you live in Ohio, if you go on Betting.net, it will actually take you to the best sites to legally bet in the state you live in. Make sure you check them out at Betting.net. And right now, we're going to go back to Ryan and Joe at the Sports Hour.
Welcome back to Talking Sports here on Froggy 95.9 and also on the Grueling Truth. Joe, we have one football game that we did not cover, and it is our Cincinnati Bengals. Our as in we're a part of it, as in we pay to be there every single game. So we can label them as our own.
I own 2 seats there.
So do I.
They're mine.
I actually take them home with me when I leave the stadium.
Yeah, unbolt them and everything.
Yeah, it's quite the process. Not very convenient. But we are taking on the team, the terrible towels. They wave toilet paper, and they use it, and it's yellow, and you can only imagine how it got to yellow because it's originally white. Taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the Cincinnati Bengals in that game are favored by 6.5 points. So first, do you think the Bengals will cover? And then we'll get to, if you do, how they will or will not cover in this game.
Bengals 73, Pittsburgh 2.
That's okay. That's bold. That's bold.
No, I think when you look at the matchup of this game, and let's go a little bit more in depth into the Cincinnati Bengals. When you look at the matchup offensively, Pittsburgh does have some offensive weapons. They have a great running back. They have a couple good receivers, but they don't have a quarterback this year. They have a young quarterback, Kenny Pickett, and Trubisky is who I can't remember Trubisky's first name. Mitch Trubisky.
Michelangelo, I think.
Yeah. So I don't think that they have the offensive firepower to compete in this game, and I think that what I hope to see and what I think will happen is a lot of the Bengals starters offensively are grinding to get in the game. They have sat and watched 3 postseason games. They've been to every game. They want to get down on the field. They're ready. What'd I say? Preseason games, man.
It's the opposite. But that's okay.
Yeah. I don't know why I said postseason, but they're itching to get on the field, and I think what we're going to see is what I hope to see, and my gut tells me this is going to be a revenge tour season for the Cincinnati Bengals, and I think that they go off Sunday, and I think that they win. I think they cover more than 6.5. If you remember, what was the score last year when they played 41-6 or 41-7?
Right. So. And to go off that, Joe, and I want to echo your sentiment when it comes to Cincinnati and the revenge. And I don't know what kind of it's not a revenge as in they didn't accomplish anything. To me, it's a we're for real tour.
Right.
Like it's to let the National Football League know this wasn't just a flash in the pan. This wasn't just, we just got hot at the right time. This is you better take us serious in the AFC for the next X amount of years to come. And if they're going to do that, dismantling an AFC North opponent who has owned them has owned the AFC North historically, and is viewed as one of the top organizations in football. But you talked about what Pittsburgh has on offense, and one thing that they don't have, which Pittsburgh has always had traditionally, is an offensive line. This is probably one of the bottom 5 offensive lines in football. And then you throw in a quarterback in Mitchell Trubisky, who at times he stares at one wide receiver, typically, and then if he's not open, he throws it anyway. And on top of that, Joe, you have a rookie that in the preseason, and let me state this is the softest preseason I ever seen. That literally the Bengals didn't play a single starter on preseason that wasn't a rookie.
Right.
Not one. So if you want to go ahead and Steelers fans, you want to name Kenny Pickett the greatest quarterback in the NFL, I understand that. You got to watch him play against third-string guys that are going to do really good in the AFL coming up soon.
Right.
So, but that being said, that means a lot to Mitchell Trubisky because the draft capital is there. He's the number 1 quarterback taken in the NFL draft, and he's right behind him. And what's Mitchell Trubisky come off of? Where he lost a job in Chicago, and now he's trying to resurrect his career as a starter. And the only way he does that is by playing good. He does not have an offensive line in front of him. Deontay Johnson is a good wide receiver. He's good at separating on coverage, but not great as in burn you. And that's typically what Pittsburgh's always had. They always had a guy that would burn you, whether it's Antonio Brown, Michael Wallace, insert player. Now they don't really have that. George Pickens has looked good. Pat Freiermuth, again, a tight end that's going to step in. But what's going to be weird, Joe, is not seeing number 7 step onto the field in a Pittsburgh uniform. It's going to be so weird not seeing Ben Roethlisberger somehow, some way, just shoving 300-pound men, just shrugging them off, and then just turning around and launching it. And you go, how in the world did he do that? And at the same time, it's going to be awesome.
Well, Ryan, as a lifelong Cincinnati fan, I'm glad.
No, without a doubt.
Ben Roethlisberger is not putting on the pads this Sunday with the Steelers. You know, I think you know, everybody knew, and anybody that follows football knew that last year was his year, right? He wasn't coming back from that. He needed to go. I'm surprised. I mean, he couldn't even tie his shoes anymore, and that's not just me saying, you know, you're making fun of Ben Roethlisberger.
That's 15 years of NFL football.
Legitimately, he couldn't tie his shoes, and he probably can't to this day. He played NFL, or he played in the NFL for 15 years, and you know, it's not like he was not an aggressive player in that position. You know, he wasn't scared to take a hit. He wasn't scared to give a hit. And love or hate Ben Roethlisberger, he did have an incredible career in Pittsburgh, and he put everything he had out on the field despite his off the field battles. You know, it was time for him to go, and I'm glad that he retired when he did, because, you know, out of pure respect of Ben Roethlisberger, Pittsburgh probably would have let him hang around if he wanted to for another year or two and make an absolute fool out of himself. So
yeah, no, I agree, and I think this is where it's almost like the script is flipped, is because no matter who Cincinnati had on offense, the Pittsburgh Steelers defense always dismantled it. And I think now we're going to see the opposite. I think the Bengals defense has a field day against the offense for Pittsburgh. Now on the other side, Pittsburgh still has a solid defense. Let's not get that confused. Now, hopefully, with a worse line or a better line this year than what they had last year, they can find a way to keep T.J. Watt quiet. That's a lot to ask. I don't feel as nervous this year as I do last year, but that being said, Joe, we have not seen this offensive line play together one time, and what do they get met with? Arguably the greatest defensive player in the NFL right now. You could argue, if you want to give it to Aaron Donald when he's not swinging helmets at people, possibly the best edge rusher in the NFL right now in T.J. Watt.
Well, you're absolutely right, and I think that maybe that is the highlight or the savior for Pittsburgh this week. But if you're going to say, okay, we have to have him perform to stay in this game, but I just don't think T.J. Watt's going to be enough. You know, why they do have two great edge rushers, and the other guy's name is escaping me right now. They actually have two great edge rushers on Pittsburgh's team, but I think their defensive secondary is a little weak. You know, just and of course you got to base that off what they have going into the season from last year, and what they did in preseason, but you can't really judge by preseason because, like you said, it's the softest preseason that I've ever seen as well. I mean, I don't know how the Bengals or any other team, based on the first 2 preseason games anyway. I know the third preseason game, typically some teams will come out and let their starters play a series of downs and maybe get a look at them and let their starters get a look at the field and get their feet under them. But, the Cincinnati Bengals didn't do that. And, they made some roster moves based on what they saw in the preseason. And I think that is kind of hard for a team to do when you're not really seeing them go up against NFL starters. You don't know what these guys are going to do because the talent gap in some of these positions, when you're talking about a 4th string or a practice squad safety against Jesse Bates, the talent level there, the talent gap is so huge that it's really hard to judge what that player would do against a 1st or 2nd string wide receiver. So, I just don't think you can really base much off the postseason. You got to look at what's on paper right now, and I think at least on paper, I think that the Cincinnati Bengals run away with this game unless they play undisciplined and bad and make mistakes, which you shouldn't do at that level, but we've seen that. So I really think, not to move too far forward, I really think that the AFC North as a whole is really a 2-team race anyway.
Yeah, I agree with you. And again, we're trying to break this down as people that watch football and are entertained by football and not just 2 Cincinnati Bengals fans. But if you want to go down by position group to position group, Cincinnati Bengals on the wide receivers clearly take that. Offensive line clearly take that.
They may have the best wide receiver core in the NFL. I'm not saying that they have any single best wide receiver in the NFL, but when you look at their wide receiver core, even the guys that are, in the 4th or 5th slot, when you take that group, they may have the best wide receiver core in the NFL.
Right. And that's on the offensive side. The only thing that I would give to them, and you mentioned Najee Harris as a good rusher, but Najee Harris got all of his stats because they accumulated, and Mike Tomlin doesn't realize that he can actually use other people to run the football. That's just the way it's always been.
Right.
He will run you into the ground, 400 times, and that's what Najee Harris was. He was like a 3.6 to 3.7 yards per gain rusher, and in the NFL, Joe, that doesn't scare you.
Right.
Joe Mixon averages more yards than that. So right now in their careers, I'd say Joe Mixon's better. On the only thing, the offense that wins is Pat Freiermuth, I think, is a better tight end than Hayden Hurst. And that's probably pretty close because Hayden Hurst has always been behind guys. Everywhere he's been, he was behind Mark Andrews coming out of college. And then more recently, Austin Hooper got paid as soon as he went to the Falcons. So we'll really see what Hayden Hurst, and if you want to talk about training camp, most impressive player in training camp was Hayden Hurst. And then you look on the defensive side, I think individually T.J. Watt is the best player on the defense. But if you look at position groups as a whole, I think Cincinnati wins way more than they lose on that side. And I think Trey Hendrickson cannot be stopped this weekend. I think Trey Hendrickson individually will have a better game than T.J. Watt just because I think the Bengals will have a game plan for T.J. Watt, but there's no way the Steelers can have a game plan for everything that Cincinnati's going to throw at them on their defensive line.
No, I think when you look at the defense position by positions, when you look at edge rushers, maybe the slight advantage goes to the Steelers, but you look at interior defensive line, you look at the box, you look at the front four there, everywhere but the edge rushers, the Bengals win.
Right.
I think you look at the corners and the defensive backfield with Jesse Bates and Eli Apple. I think the Bengals take that by a large margin. So I don't really see, in my mind, and maybe I'm a little jaded because I am such a Bengals fan, but in my mind, even trying to be neutral on this game, I don't even see how the Pittsburgh Steelers match up against the Cincinnati Bengals this week.
So putting the homerism aside, and I want you to make the defense on how Pittsburgh stays in this game.
Well, I think Pittsburgh's going to have to play defense, and I think that they're going to have to do everything they can to pressure Joe Burrow every time he comes out on the field. Now, I think that while Cincinnati is still going to struggle with their offensive line because it wasn't exactly the change that I wanted to see, they are immensely better than they were last year. And we know how good the Cincinnati Bengals were last year with possibly the worst, or at least the top 3 worst offensive line in the NFL. I think that their offensive line now is out of the 32 teams. I would put them somewhere right in the middle, 15th or 16th.
Right.
So other than that, everything that the Bengals have done in the off season has made them a better team. They didn't digress at all coming into this 2022 season. So really the only thing that they can do is the Steelers are going to have to play great defense. They're going to have to pressure Burrow. They're going to have to get him uncomfortable, which, Joe Burrow, we all know, we've seen it. He's got ice in his veins. It doesn't matter what you do with him.
Right.
They're going to have to find a way to cover T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. And
Tyler Boyd, who typically goes off against his home city team.
And Tyler Boyd, and typically to do that, you have to play a cover 3 option or a cover 4, and if they're going to do that, then they're going to open up the running game, and then right there you have Joe Mixon. So I don't know if I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers defensive coordinator right now, I'm sitting around going, oh my God, what am I going to do? What am I going to do this weekend? Now on the other hand, we've all been Bengals fans long enough that, we still haven't got it out of our systems yet. The Bengals can find a way to lose this game too.
Yep.
I mean, Joe Burrow could go out. He could not protect the football. He could make some bad reads. He could throw into some coverage that he shouldn't be thrown into. And 1 or 2 turnovers at the wrong time can cost you an NFL game. It doesn't matter how good you are.
I agree with you. I think the way that the Steelers win this game is it's got to be 14-10, something around that nature. Cincinnati's offense struggles. It just never finds continuity. It never finds its rhythm. And the front 7 for the Steelers win against the front 7 for Cincinnati. Outside of that, that's the only way I see it. And, I think there's no way if it turns into a shootout that the Steelers win, in my opinion.
Right.
I just don't think there's any way with the firepower, with the weapons. Chidobe Awuzie is going to be on Deontay Johnson. You want a technical guy on Deontay Johnson because his best skill is his route running. Well, you put a cornerback whose best skill is being physical on a good route runner, and that's typically how they counteract that. And, I think the Bengals end up coming away victorious. It's going to be a tough game. All AFC North games are tough. It seems like no matter what, they're never runaways. So.
Well, the only AFC North game that Cincinnati had an issue with last year was, for whatever reason, the Cleveland Browns. So,
and they shipped their quarterback out, thankfully.
Right, and I'm going to disagree with you a little bit, Ryan. Why this is an AFC North game and it's a conference game, I think the Bengals they do all right on, and I'll leave it at that because I don't want to get too arrogant, but I think they do all right on Sunday.
And I will proud to be wrong. Well, that's going to wrap it up here for Froggy's Talking Sports with Ryan and Joe. Appreciate you listening in. We will be back next week. Again, check us out on our social media pages. You can like us on Facebook, and we will also be on The Grueling Truth. We hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Take care, and God bless.
What's up, guys? I'm Mike Goodpasser from the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I want to thank you guys for listening here to Ryan and Joe on the Sports Hour. And I want to remind you, the Grueling Truth Sports Network is powered and brought to you by betting.net. Betting.net is the best bet for betting the online casino or sports book that's right for you. Make sure you check them out now, guys, at Betting.net. This is a great service. If you live in Indiana or you live in Kentucky or you live in Ohio, if you go on Betting.net, it will actually take you to the best sites to legally bet in the state you live in. Make sure you check them out at Betting.net. And right now, we're going to go back to Ryan and Joe at the Sports Hour.